The world is full of mysteries and secrets. Some things can be checked firsthand and even seen with your own eyes. But there are places you just can't walk into. Information about them is often classified, and finding reliable details is incredibly difficult. It's to these places that we'll venture, uncovering the most astonishing mysteries of our planet. These are territories with official restrictions on entry. Some are so hidden they don't even appear on maps. Others are lands people prefer to avoid altogether. We'll show you ancient ruins lost in time and dangerous areas where nature sets its own rules. You'll see their stories and discover what makes these places so mysterious and what secrets they hold. Forbidden places on Earth. Take a close look at this map. Green represents the areas with minimal human intervention, while orange, red, and purple indicate regions of more intense human activity. As you see, the developed areas massively prevail on the planet. Humans have taken over 75% of the land outside the ice sheets. Moreover, these places are closely monitored by satellite cameras. It might seem that not a single corner of the planet has escaped them, but that's not true. Even in the 21st century, there are still places hidden from human eyes, some by nature and some by people themselves. Some of them have never been mapped, while others haven't made it to the maps yet, or they were purposefully left out. Consider, for example, Sandy Island, somewhere between Australia and New Caledonia. It was discovered and mapped in the 1770s by none other than James Cook. Despite extensive searches in recent times, no one has found the island, so it was concluded that it never actually existed in the first place. It appeared on Google Maps until November 26, 2012, before being removed. However, there's still an old satellite image from 2009. We have collected a bunch of other hidden places in our list of Top 10 Fascinating Unmapped Places on the Planet. One fascinating hidden corner of the world is the Rebirth Island in the southwestern part of the Aral Sea. Here, there was a place you couldn't find on any map. Now, the sea has become shallow, and the island is turning into a peninsula. Once upon a time, huge herds of saigas grazed there, and the bays were teeming with fish. But then, something unexpected happened. In 1954, the island became the site of a military camp designed to accommodate military personnel, researchers, security staff, and their families. It was a secret base known as Aralsk 7, which remained off the maps and was eventually deserted in the early 1990s following the collapse of the USSR. But you can still find ammunition, shell casings, and ballistic tips there. And now, let's travel to a place where no one has set foot. It is located between China and Bhutan. This is Mount Gangar Punsum, with a height of 7,570 meters, 24,836 feet, also known as the White Peak of the Three Spiritual Brothers. This is the highest unclimbed peak on the planet and the 40th highest mountain in the world. Remarkably, all attempts to ascend it were unsuccessful. This is especially surprising given that most of the peaks in the Himalayas were conquered decades ago. China and Bhutan have long argued over who owns it. While Chinese maps show the peak lies right on the border, other sources place it entirely within Bhutan. The first measurements and mapping of the mountain were done in 1922. At that time, the region was still pretty inaccurately mapped. Until recently, its depiction varied across maps, with inconsistent locations and elevations, to the extent that one of the initial expedition teams couldn't find it. Bhutan remained closed to mountaineers until 1983 because the high peaks were believed to be the home of spirits. Between 1985 and 1986, when the country finally opened its doors, there were 4 attempts to climb the mountain, but none of them was successful. By 1994, the government banned climbing mountains higher than 6,000 meters, 19,685 feet, out of respect for local spiritual beliefs. And since 2004, mountaineering has been completely prohibited in Bhutan. In 1998, when there was still no complete ban in place, a Japanese expedition received permission from the Chinese Mountaineering Association to climb Gangkhar Puensum from the Tibetan side, north of Bhutan. However, a long-running border dispute with Bhutan eventually led to the permit's withdrawal. To date, Bhutan itself hasn't yet surveyed the peak and seems to have little interest in doing so anytime soon. Given the difficulty of obtaining government permits, it's likely that the mountain will remain untouched for many years to come. It turns out that we don't know much about this place, but thanks to chance, we know exactly what we'll find in the next one. All thanks to environmental scientist Dr. Julian Bayliss. In 2012, Bayliss discovered a new ecosystem using satellite images. He found a strange spot in Mozambique, which turned out to be a pristine tropical forest inside a cratered mountain. This was Mount Liko in the north of the country. The scientist examined this volcano-like mound, rising sharply up. The walls of the crater are 700 meters high in parts and sheer with a patch of dark green forest. 5 years later, having assembled a team of scientists, naturalists, and researchers, Dr. Bayliss flew to Mozambique. Talking to local communities around the base of Mount Liko, he was informed that no one had ever been up the mountain. The scientist assessed the route using satellite imagery and set out for his hike. He brought along a drone to have a closer look at the mountain, which until then was only captured by satellite. The drone launch was a success, revealing the mountain's hidden world, which was supposedly never seen by human eyes. Then, Bayliss and his colleagues made quite an arduous ascent. Even though the climb was challenging, it proved to be fruitful. The team was excited to see a lush forest with vines and lianas, as well as discover several previously unknown species of animals and birds. There was also a new species of butterfly, an unknown species of amphibian, a freshwater crab, and various never-seen-before small mammals and reptiles. Mysteriously, the group also found some upturned pots at the source of a stream, suggesting that they were probably a spiritual offering from a medicine man to keep the water flowing down to the settlements below. No one could imagine how a person could ever reach that point, as Dr. Bayliss's team needed to use special climbing equipment to climb the sheer crater walls. How do we know that these were most likely ritual offerings? The fact is that Mount Liko and many other East African mountains are called Inselbergs, that is, island mountains. These formations emerged as the surrounding plateau eroded away, leaving behind more erosion-resistant materials like granite. Eventually, they began to contrast so sharply in altitude with the adjacent lowlands that they started to influence the local weather patterns. They create clouds and cause rain as air rises from the warm lowlands to the cooler upper regions. This is why Liko and other East African Inselbergs serve as vital sources of water for surrounding lowlands, and locals call them rain-making mountains, which explains why the pots that were left at the top were likely a form of homage and offering to the mountain. Next, we explore another blank spot on the map, Lake Vostok. At the southern pole of cold, that is, the area of the globe with the lowest recorded temperatures in this hemisphere, beneath the surface of the Antarctic ice sheet, 3,488 meters, 11,444 feet below the Russian research station Vostok, there is an accumulation of water the size of Lake Ontario. This is Lake Vostok. It is currently the largest subglacial lake in the world. It is estimated that the average temperature of the water in this lake is -3 degrees Celsius, 27 degrees Fahrenheit. It does not freeze because of the high pressure of the weight of the ice above it. Geothermal heat from the Earth's depths warm the bottom of the lake, while the ice sheet insulates it from the low temperatures at the surface. Scientists estimate that the ice cover over Lake Vostok has existed for about 15 million years. Biologists assume that the lake is home to microorganisms that may have entered the lake during its formation and have since then adapted to the extreme conditions and exceptionally low nutrient concentrations that prevail there. Since Lake Vostok has been under ice for millions of years, the organisms in it must have evolved independently over this period. This may have led to the emergence of life forms that are unique to this strange place. Hence, scientists plan to explore this and other subglacial lakes in Antarctica. Before this, however, glaciologists need to learn more about the ice above the lake, as well as the rocks and sediments beneath it. Actually, the first person to suggest the existence of a subglacial lake in the region was geographer Andrei Kapitsa. Subsequent studies have confirmed his hypothesis. Other lakes in central Antarctica were mentioned by a pilot, Rady Robinson. It is believed that he discovered them in 1959. How? The surface above such large subglacial lakes remains flat and smooth. He noticed such places and suggested the existence of such lakes when they were still only a scientific assumption and not a fact. A study over Lake Vostok was conducted 3 years later, and in 1967, glaciologist Igor Zodakov wrote his PhD thesis on the topic of the enormous pressure of the ice sheet and turning its lower parts into water. Another probing took place in the 1970s, and a comprehensive study in the early 1990s led to the convening of an international conference on Lake Vostok, held in Cambridge in 1994. It is unlikely to be inhabited by fish or other large creatures. Presumably, there will be just bacteria. Many biologists want to take water samples from Lake Vostok. The difficulty is figuring out how to sample water covered by 4-kilometer, 2.5-mile thick ice. The task is further complicated by ensuring that the lake is not contaminated during the probing process. Otherwise, its value to science would be at risk. The drilling crews working at Vostok Station since 1970 would simply drill through the ice and lower the equipment into the lake. But in case of drilling, the lake would be contaminated with kerosene, which is used to lubricate the drill and prevent the borehole above it from freezing. Other groups of scientists have proposed developing a different scheme for lowering scientific instruments into the lake, such as one that involves using hot water for thawing. In 2012, a Russian research team did drill through the ice in the classical way to the surface of the lake and obtained samples, which were sent for study, among others, to France. As a result, previously unknown bacteria were discovered, which may be unique inhabitants of Lake Vostok. But now, let's sail 1,700 kilometers, 1,100 miles away from Antarctica, and even away from the continents, to find ourselves on an island that is 93% covered by glaciers. It is the most remote island in the world that can hardly be found on a map. It is located in the South Atlantic at the southern tip of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. The nearest inhabited land is the island of Tristan da Cunha, a British overseas territory, 2,253 kilometers, 1,400 miles to the north. The island is administered by Norway and has been declared an uninhabited protected nature reserve. It has an area of 49 square kilometers, 19 square miles, and the center of the island is an ice-filled crater of an extinct volcano. The island was discovered in 1739 by Frenchman Jean-Baptiste Charles Bouvet de Lozier during the French exploration mission in the South Atlantic. But they did not reach the coast. The next time the island was encountered was in 1808 by the British, who named it Lindsay Island. In 1825, the British Crown claimed rights to it and named it Liverpool Island. In 1927, the first Norwegian expedition landed there and claimed it as belonging to Norway. This is when the island was given its present name, Bouvet Island. In 1930, after a dispute with the United Kingdom was resolved, Bouvet Island was declared Norwegian property. Due to its remote location, Bouvet Island never became a widely visited site. It was therefore surprising when an abandoned lifeboat was found near it in 1964. No sign of a man was spotted on the island, but this mystery attracted the attention of writers. So far, Bouvet Island has been the site of action for at least 3 books and the 2004 movie Alien vs. Predator. In the movie, the screenwriters decided to use the island's Norwegian name, Buvatoya. But the island shown in the movie is actually far away from the real Bouvet Island. Its northwestern part is mostly ice-free, and a weather station is located there. There are also fur seals and chinstrap penguins and macaroni penguins on Bouvet Island. The latter is one of the most common species in the world and can be easily recognized by its distinctive orange feathers. These migratory penguins feed almost exclusively on crustaceans, preferring to reproduce in areas with rocky slopes. This makes Bouvet Island an almost perfect place for them. In total, there are more than 4,500 macaroni penguins and about 400 chinstrap penguins there. Besides them, there are orcas and humpback whales living close to the shore. This is what the local fauna looks like. But what about humans? No man has ever wintered on the island. In addition, its development is very complicated due to the problems of bringing expeditions to the island. Glaciers prevent landing on the southern and eastern coasts, and steep cliffs up to 490 meters, 1,607 feet high prevent access in the north, west, and southwest. So a helicopter is the most convenient means to access the island, which lacks natural harbors. This brings up the advantage of visiting this island: the opportunity to see a place with virtually no infrastructure, which is becoming increasingly difficult to do in today's world. Such an expedition would definitely take you away from your normal daily life. And here's a place you can't visit because it exists, but it kind of doesn't. How can that be? Let's take a look at the North Pacific. If you look at the map, you won't see anything. But in fact, there is a large Pacific garbage patch. It spans an area equivalent to 3 times the size of France, extending from the west coast of North America to Japan. The patch is made up of 2 parts: the western garbage patch spreading out near Japan, and the eastern garbage patch between the U.S. states of Hawaii and California. These areas are connected by a zone where the warm waters of the South Pacific meet the cooler waters of the Arctic. The zone acts like a highway where trash moves from one area to another. The trash in the patch accumulates because much of it is non-biodegradable. For example, plastic just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. So if you imagined the garbage patch simply as trash floating in the ocean, you're wrong. It's actually made up almost entirely of microplastics. You can't always see it with the naked eye. Even satellite images don't show a giant patch of trash. It's just that the water in the area looks like muddy soup, and it's mixed in with larger items like fishing nets and shoes. Why is it plastic that makes up the biggest part of the marine debris? Firstly, because of its durability and low cost, it is being used increasingly. Secondly, as already mentioned, it does not undergo biodegradation, but simply breaks down into smaller pieces. By the way, you could see a no less interesting picture if you were to dive to the bottom beneath the large Pacific garbage patch. The thing is that as oceanographers and ecologists have recently discovered, about 70% of marine debris sinks to the ocean floor. No one knows for sure how much trash is in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. What complicates the task for scientists is the fact that not all debris floats on the surface. Denser fragments can sink centimeters, inches, or even several meters, feet below the surface, making volume measurement nearly impossible. It is estimated that 80% of the plastic in the ocean comes from land-based sources, and the remaining 20% from boats and other marine sources. Of course, these percentages vary depending on the region. And half of the mass of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is made up of, guess what? Synthetic fishing nets. And of course, the garbage harms the local fauna. Turtles, albatrosses, seals, and other marine animals get tangled in the nets and drown. Or, for example, feed garbage to their young mistakenly. Ecologists did not remain unaffected by the problem and came up with an interesting idea for cleaning up the area. The publisher Lad Bible teamed up with Plastic Oceans Foundation in 2018 and called for a new state to be founded on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and for people to become its citizens with their own passports and currency. The eccentric initiative, launched for the sake of drawing attention to the problem, found its supporters. More than 200,000 people have already become so-called citizens of the Garbage Islands, including Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, and other stars. Of course, this initiative cannot be taken seriously, but despite its hilarious nature, it is a good way to draw attention to the problem, and thus find methods and means to solve it. Our next island, however, does exist, and some animals live there very happily. We are talking about Okunoshima, or unofficially, Rabbit Island. It is a small island located in the inland sea of Japan. It is just over 4 kilometers, 2.5 miles in circumference, and can be walked around in about an hour and a half. This tourist attraction is home to hundreds of wild European rabbits that roam the island. Seems like a harmless little place, right? But it was once erased from the map. But first things first. In general, Okunoshima became famous in 2014 when a video of a woman being trampled by rabbits went viral. As a result, while 136,000 people visited the island in 2005, their number grew to 254,000 in 2015. Since then, other viral videos showing flocks of rabbits on the island have attracted guests to the island. Of course, there is a downside to this popularity. Due to the intense human intervention, the ecological situation on the island is now not so safe for the animals. But how did the rabbits get to this island, you may wonder? That's a good question, and there's no answer to it because no one really knows that for sure. There are rumors that the rabbits were brought to the island by a British couple, or that a nearby school let them out in 1971. Estimates vary, but in 2007 there were about 300 rabbits on the island, and now the number has grown to between 700 and 1,000. European rabbits from Okunoshima chew leaves, roots, wood, seeds, and occasionally snack on manure. But most tourists have heard that rabbits also eat carrots, lettuce, and cabbage, so this is the kind of food they bring along as treats. This diet is ruinous to the island's furry inhabitants, as their digestive systems have difficulty digesting vegetables. There are signs all over the island warning that rabbits are not to be fed, picked up, or chased. However, there was an exception to this rule. The hotel used to sell food so that tourists could feed the fluffy animals, for example, in winter when food was scarce. But this practice was terminated. Rabbits are given only bottled water. Why? The thing is that the island has never undergone large-scale decontamination operations after it was used for chemical testing, and the residual toxins poisoned the groundwater. So most of the rabbits live in the grass near the hotel, waiting to be fed and hydrated. And the next location is a place where both humans and other living creatures can shelter in the event of a terrible disaster. This is the NORAD complex in Cheyenne Mountain. Have you ever seen the hit Hollywood movies War Games and Stargate? That's where parts of Cheyenne Mountain were featured. We are talking about a guarded underground bunker of the U.S. Armed Forces, which is closed to the public and is situated in the state of Colorado. It was meant to be a shield against Soviet long-range bombers at the height of the Cold War in the late 1950s. What makes it one of the safest places in the world? The Cheyenne Mountain Complex lies beneath a layer of granite at an altitude of 600 meters, 2,000 feet, and spreads over an area of 2 hectares, 20,000 square meters. The facility has 6 tunnels, each 3 stories high. It consists of 15 buildings resting on shock-absorbing springs and is protected against seismic activity and nuclear explosions. The 2 main blast doors leading into the complex close in about 45 seconds. They are 1 meter, 3.5 feet thick, and weigh more than 20 tons. The doors only close in case of an emergency. The complex can withstand a 30 megaton nuclear explosion at a distance of up to 2 kilometers, 1.24 miles. This is twice as much as the most powerful U.S. thermonuclear bomb, Castle Bravo. The complex also has unique filters to capture airborne biochemical, radiological, and atomic contaminants. There are several centers here that warn of missile, atmospheric, and space threats. They include, first of all, the Air Operations Center. It maintains continuous control of North American airspace to prevent enemy aircraft from entering. The center monitors more than 2.5 million such flights each year. Secondly, there is a Ballistic Missile Defense Center. It detects missile launches around the world and determines whether they pose a threat to the North American region. And third, the Space Defense Operations Center. Today, it tracks more than 8,000 items, including cargoes, rocket bodies, and debris. The bunker's command center was upgraded in 2003 and 2004 for $13 million. Since 2008, the complex has been used for U.S. Air Force aircrew training and as a backup command center. Do you think this facility is classified? Then how about an entire country? North Korea is known to be the most closed state in the world. On Google Maps, information about it is pretty limited. This is a bit frightening. Just imagine how its citizens live, virtually cut off from the rest of the world. That's why you can't find Room 39 on maps. This is the name of a secret North Korean party organization. Its official name is Central Committee Bureau 39 of the Workers' Party of Korea. It was founded by Kim Jong-il, the son of then-President Kim Il-sung, back in the late 1970s. How did the organization get its name? It's quite simple. Room 39 is the largest office of the 3 North Korean secret services known to the world. In addition to it, there are 2 other important services: Office 35, dealing with intelligence, and Office 38, responsible for legal financial activities of the party. They used to be located on the 3rd floor where Kim Jong-il's office used to be, so these 3 services are nicknamed the 3rd floor by the rest of the world. But Room 39 is the most mysterious and controversial of them all because of its mission. What exactly does this organization do? Well, here's where it gets interesting. It is estimated to make between $500 million and $1 billion a year or more through illegal activities such as counterfeiting $100 bills, international insurance fraud, and production of controlled substances. Other activities attributed to Room 39 include selling made-in-North Korea clothing with a sewn-in made-in-China label, selling artificial eyelashes, eyebrows, and beards, and buying Russian oil for cheap through dealers in Singapore. In 2006, some Western media reported that this secret service brought in up to 50% of all North Korean revenues. However, the details of the work of this service are thoroughly concealed from its citizens, and even more so from foreigners. No one even knows the name of the head of the organization, although there are rumors that Room 39 was headed for a long time by a former classmate of the country's leader, Kim Jong-il. But this, like many other things related to North Korea, is uncertain. Of course, pop culture couldn't miss such a mysterious object. Room 39 appears in the 2005 video game Mercenaries: Playground of Destruction. The former foreign minister of North Korea heads it there. It also appears in the 5th season of the British-American series Strike Back: Legacy. And we approach the final object of our journey through interesting places that cannot be found on the map. And it literally cannot be found. In the international waters of the Atlantic Ocean, about 600 kilometers, 370 miles off the coast of West Africa, in the Gulf of Guinea is nothing. Actually, according to the maps, there is an island there. You know well what it is in the usual sense, a piece of land surrounded by water. But there is no land in the place in question. There is nothing but a buoy, which fulfills an important, though quite ordinary mission. It measures wind speed and direction, air temperature, precipitation, humidity, solar radiation, pressure, and temperature up to 500 meters, 1,600 feet below the ocean surface. By the way, it has a very poetic name, Seoul. It is named after a musical genre and is part of a system of 17 buoys placed in the tropical Atlantic Ocean. Seoul is described as a 1 square meter island with a scale rank 100. This means that it should never be shown on maps. Seoul appeared in 1997 and less than a year later disappeared. It was replaced with a new one in 1998. It's been floating there since, 3.8 meters, 12 feet high, and attached to the seabed. And the seabed is, just imagine, 4,940 meters, 16,210 feet below it. The nearest land to Null Island is a small island, a real one this time, 570 kilometers, 354 miles to the north, which is part of Ghana. But this place is notable in particular because the equator and the zero meridian intersect here. That is, its coordinates are 0 longitude and 0 latitude. Partly because of this, Null Island has become a cartographer's joke. Let's go into a little more detail here. When addresses are added to a map, a program called a geocoder turns the physical address into geo-coordinates. As a result, the location is easily plotted on the map. But sometimes errors occur, which in turn causes the geocoding program to make errors. It then indicates that there is no information or that the data is 0.0. And what happens at that point? Bingo! The program sees those coordinates and starts correlating them to some null island near Africa. This is what happened to Seoul, and more than once. For some time in the late noughties, only geographers knew about this so-called island. But then it became famous, quite unexpectedly. The thing is that the fitness app Strava detected high activity there, as if it was full of people running and doing other sports. Although, as you may recall, there's nothing on the map at that spot. Nevertheless, according to the geotags, the activity of fitness enthusiasts was off the charts. People began to suspect that something was wrong here. Some speculated that there was a classified base there, either Chinese or American. But it was probably because users were entering 0.0 coordinates in a fitness tracking app to hide their location. That is, without knowing it, they entered the location of the island. Eventually, a local African company started taking tourists to Null Island, and instead of the island, the tourists saw, yes, the weather buoy Seoul. The island was overall so intriguing that it even got its own website, though it's now shut down. It also has a flag, and the geographers took it a step further. They named the place the Republic of Null Island and came up with a history and a cartographic image for it. In general, there are still many corners and sites in the world that have not left a trace on the map or have been deliberately concealed by man. What do they hide? This is yet to be discovered. Imagine we are in a small American town. There's not even a traffic light here. All inhabitants know each other, and it would seem that such a place cannot bring us any surprises. But things start to get weird around here. One of your neighbors claims to have intercepted an alien message. Another claims to have seen a strange object over the city, and it is all somehow connected to a highly classified underground base going down 7 stories beneath the town. What is it? Fantasy of people craving fame? Or the terrible truth? Or maybe there really are battles between humans and non-humans under your feet, as the rumors claim. It is difficult to check this, because access to the base is prohibited for ordinary people. But with us, you will learn a lot of interesting things, not only about this base, but also about other intriguing corners of the Earth. Forbidden places on our planet. This place is so secret that even its very existence was officially admitted by the U.S. authorities only almost 60 years after its founding, not to mention what is happening inside it. Members of the public are kept out by warning signs, electronic surveillance, and armed guards. Welcome to Area 51. A lot of questions arise at once. Is this the area with so much hype about it? Is there a crashed flying saucer hidden there and alien bodies being examined? Yes, it is. But it's actually just a U.S. Air Force base. So why do conspiracy theorists like it so much if it's just a regular military base? Well, we have to admit, it's not really regular. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so highly classified. But let's go through every detail, step by step. The base is located on the shores of the dry Groom Lake in the Nevada desert, 135 kilometers, 85 miles northwest of Las Vegas. No one really knows the exact area, but judging from satellite images, it's about 100 square kilometers, just a little less than 40 square miles. That's about the size of 2 Manhattans. Okay, wait. Are there publicly available satellite images of such a highly classified facility? Yes, there are, and they're very clear. And it's particularly strange because flying over the base is strictly forbidden, even for military planes, let alone civilian ones. But you can even take a look at the base from above, and we'll give you a short tour. The location of Area 51 alone speaks for itself. It is situated just around the corner from the legendary Nevada test site, where U.S. nuclear weapons were tested from the 1950s through the 1990s. On satellite images, we see a rather typical picture for such a military base. Featureless hangars of unknown purpose, other buildings, an airstrip, SUVs parked in a row, several airplanes parked. The territory of the dry lake is crossed by a hard-surfaced road, in the middle of which we see an obscure platform laid out, presumably with concrete slabs, and no flying saucers, of course. What is the real purpose of Area 51? And what's really going on there? And what does the number 51 stand for? So were there some other 50 areas before this one? Or are they still there? There are lots of questions, as secrecy only promotes them. However, it is more or less reliably known that this military base was built during the Cold War between the US and the USSR as a center for testing and development of the latest aircraft. In particular, U-2 and SR-71 Blackbird reconnaissance aircraft were developed and tested here. The base opened in 1955, but the CIA officially admitted its existence only in 2013. 4 months after that, Barack Obama became the first U.S. president to publicly mention Area 51. So what is going on there now? There is very little official information, but it is presumed that the U.S. military continues to use the base to develop military aircraft. It is believed that about 1,500 people work there. They get to work exclusively by air, special flights from Las Vegas. The secrecy surrounding Area 51 has fostered many urban legends and fueled popular conspiracy theories. Imagine we are in a small American town. There's not even a traffic light here. All inhabitants know each other, and it would seem that such a place cannot bring us any surprises. But things start to get weird around here. One of your neighbors claims to have intercepted an alien message. Another claims to have seen a strange object over the city. And someone else swears that the cows here give birth to not calves at all. And it is all somehow connected to a highly classified underground base going down 7 stories beneath the town. What is it? Fantasy of people craving fame? Or the terrible truth? Or maybe there really are battles between humans and non-humans under your feet, as the rumors claim. It is difficult to check this, because access to the base is prohibited for ordinary people. But with us, you will learn a lot of interesting things, not only about this base, but also about other intriguing corners of the Earth. Forbidden places on our planet. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to show YouTube algorithms the topics you find interesting. This place is so secret that even its very existence was officially admitted by the U.S. authorities only almost 60 years after its founding. Not to mention what is happening inside it. Members of the public are kept out by warning signs, electronic surveillance, and armed guards. Welcome to Area 51. A lot of questions arise at once. Is this the area with so much hype about it? Is there a crashed flying saucer hidden there and alien bodies being examined? Yes, it is. But it's actually just a U.S. Air Force base. So why do conspiracy theorists like it so much if it's just a regular military base? Well, we have to admit, it's not really regular. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so highly classified. But let's go through every detail, step by step. The base is located on the shores of the dry Groom Lake in the Nevada desert, 135 kilometers, 85 miles northwest of Las Vegas. No one really knows the exact area, but judging from satellite images, it's about 100 square kilometers, just a little less than 40 square miles. That's about the size of 2 Manhattans. Okay, wait. Are there publicly available satellite images? Such a highly classified facility? Yes, there are, and they're very clear. And it's particularly strange because flying over the base is strictly forbidden, even for military planes, let alone civilian ones. But you can even take a look at the base from above, and we'll give you a short tour. The location of Area 51 alone speaks for itself. It is situated just around the corner from the legendary Nevada test site, where U.S. nuclear weapons were tested from the 1950s through the 1990s. On satellite images, we see a rather typical picture for such a military base. Featureless hangars of unknown purpose, other buildings, an airstrip, SUVs parked in a row, several airplanes parked. The territory of the dry lake is crossed by a hard-surfaced road, in the middle of which we see an obscure platform laid out, presumably with concrete slabs, and no flying saucers, of course. What is the real purpose of Area 51? And what's really going on there? And what does the number 51 stand for? So were there some other 50 areas before this one? Or are they still there? There are lots of questions, as secrecy only promotes them. However, it is more or less reliably known that this military base was built during the Cold War between the US and the USSR as a center for testing and development of the latest aircraft. In particular, U-2 and SR-71 Blackbird reconnaissance aircraft were developed and tested here. The base opened in 1955, but the CIA officially admitted its existence only in 2013. 4 months after that, Barack Obama became the first U.S. president to publicly mention Area 51. So what is going on there now? There is very little official information, but it is presumed that the U.S. military continues to use the base to develop military aircraft. It is believed that about 1,500 people work there. They get to work exclusively by air, special flights from Las Vegas. The secrecy surrounding Area 51 has fostered many urban legends and fueled popular conspiracy theories. The best-known legend claims that Area 51 contains an alien spaceship that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, and even the bodies of alien pilots. But the U.S. government insists there were no aliens, and the crashed ship was a weather balloon. Nevertheless, plenty of people claim to have seen UFOs over or near Area 51, and others assume that they have been abducted by aliens and even experimented on before being returned to Earth. Given these rumors, it's not surprising that Area 51 has been featured in a number of science fiction television shows, such as the X-Files series. And in 1989, a man named Robert Lazar claimed to have worked on researching alien technology at the base. He said he was personally involved in a reverse engineering of alien technology. That is, he said, a group of specialists possessing alien technology tried to determine how it worked and what principles it was based on. Despite the immense long-term interest in Area 51 and a lot of bold assumptions, there is not a single evidence that something really extraordinary is going on there. Every convincing assumption from conspiracists is followed by a much more convincing rebuttal from skeptics. By the way, if the closed and secretive nature of a military facility is easy to explain, the closed nature of many religious sites is much less obvious. But that's only at first glance. And to clarify the issue, we are going to the major center of the Christian world, the Vatican. It is the smallest state in the world, located in the territory of Rome, the capital of Italy. Its area is just tiny when compared even to cities, let alone countries. It is only 0.49 square kilometers, 0.19 square miles. This is literally just a few city blocks. For comparison, Central Park in New York is 7 times bigger. But it's a separate state in every respect. Before the introduction of the euro, the Vatican even had its own currency, and there was originally a deep meaning in this separation. This place is called Bohemian Grove, a 1,100-hectare, 2,700-acre site located in California. It belongs to a private men's club called the Bohemian Club. Since 1899, in mid-July, many of the world's most prominent men have spent a 2-week holiday here. The Bohemian Club consists exclusively of men. Only 4 women at the beginning of the 20th century were honored members of the club, but still with certain restrictions. So who are the members of this club, and what is so special about it? Why is it shrouded in so many layers of rumor, speculation, and prejudice? The club consists of bright artists and musicians, prominent business leaders, influential government officials, high-ranking media executives, and even former U.S. presidents. It seems one should be outstanding in something in order to become a member of the Bohemian Club. Well, yes, but that's not enough. We'll talk about membership in the club a little further on. But now, let's return to its main location, Bohemian Grove. So what is going on here during those 2 weeks in July when prominent personalities come here from all over the world? Basically, it's a big high society gathering. Members can even invite guests to the Grove. Of course, not just anyone. The Bohemian Grove guest lists are strictly coordinated and carefully guarded against leaks. Well-known members of the club prefer not to give any comments. The symbol of the Grove since its founding of the club is a 9-meter, 30-foot owl made of concrete. It symbolizes knowledge and wisdom. The statue is mounted on a steel pedestal in front of the lake in the center of the Grove. Since 1929, an annual cremation of care ceremony has taken place here. It is a theatrical performance in which some members of the club participate as actors. In the very first one, the spirit of care was burned. But the conspiracy theory says that this is not a performance, but a real sacrifice. Still, what is the mission of this club? And why do these people gather? Well, just like members of any other club, to chat with a close social circle. Of course, it can be easily assumed that it is in Bohemian Grove where the destiny of the world is shaped. And it would be naive to believe that participants discuss nothing more than the weather at these meetings. The motto of the Grove is "Weaving spiders come not here." This means that all problems and business deals should be left outside the club. Sounds kind of ironic, because some important political and business deals were made exactly here, at least according to leaks from club members themselves. The Grove is particularly famous for being the site of a meeting in 1942 where the Manhattan Project was planned, which later led to the atomic bomb creation. The members of the club do not even conceal this. On the contrary, they often tell this story to new members. By the way, to become a fully fledged member of the Bohemian Club, it is not enough to be just an outstanding personality. Sometimes one has to wait for a long time. The point is that the number of club members is limited. No more than 2,700 people. New members have to wait for years for a seat to become vacant. The waiting time has sometimes been as long as 15 years. Long-term members of the club have their privileges. After 40 years of full membership, a member receives Old Guard status. This gives a reserved seat at the daily talks in the Grove and other privileges. Former U.S. President Herbert Hoover was admitted to the Old Guard in 1953. In honor of the event, redwood branches from Bohemian Grove were delivered by plane to the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York, where the ceremony was held, and were used to decorate the banquet hall for the ceremony. In his welcoming speech, Hoover compared the honor of Old Guard status to his role as a veteran advisor to subsequent presidents. The Grove's territory is guarded by armed men. The airspace is patrolled by helicopters. The guards use high-tech equipment, including thermal and night vision cameras, motion detectors, and alarm systems with vibration sensors. The security level is especially enhanced when participants arrive. Nevertheless, in 2000, two men, Alex Jones and Mike Hansen, managed to capture the ritual near the lake on video. And in 2004, a man who worked at the Bohemian Club and called himself Kyle filmed the interior of the concrete owl statue in the center of the Grove by the lake. These were not the only cases in history when outsiders got behind the scenes of the Bohemian Grove, but so far, they are the most recent. And now we move on to another critical and strictly guarded location in the U.S. It is a 440 square kilometer, 170 square mile American military base in Kentucky. It is named in honor of Henry Knox, Chief of Artillery during the American War of Independence in the 18th century and the first U.S. Secretary of War. The base is adjacent to the U.S. Gold Reserve Vault, which holds the big part of the official gold reserves of the United States. That's what we are looking for. The vault is managed by the U.S. Treasury Department and guarded by the United States Mint Police. Its security is ensured at the highest level, the uttermost highest. The facility even looks so monumental and formidable that it inspires hopelessness of penetration attempts by its very appearance. It's located among the rocks. The roofs and walls are bomb-proof, and the perimeter protection levels are simply exceptional. Steel fences, surveillance in all possible spectra, multi-factor alarm system, patrol helicopters, and of course, armed to the teeth paramilitary security guards. There is even a catchphrase in the movie. When police officers find a large cache of illegal weapons, they exclaim, "There are enough weapons here for the defense of Fort Knox." The expression, "secure as Fort Knox," a symbol of safety and security, has also become commonly used. and there is truly a lot to protect. It is one of the largest depositories of the U.S. Gold Reserve. According to official data, Fort Knox contains 4,580 metric tons, 147 million troy ounces in gold bars. Only the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which stores about 7,000 metric tons of gold, has more. The vault was built on the initiative of the Treasury Department in 1936. The first gold consignments were accompanied by combat vehicles of the first U.S. Army. In the past, other valuable items, such as the originals of the U.S. Constitution and the American Declaration of Independence, were also kept there. A few more words about Fort Knox's degree of protection. This is something that could be talked about for hours. The aforementioned bomb-proof walls are made of granite covered with a layer of concrete. The entrance is barred by a door weighing 18 metric tons. To open it, you need to know the code, which is shared among several people and is not known to anyone in full. There is a self-contained life support and power system in case of attack. There are sufficient supplies of food and water. At the lower part of the vault is an escape tunnel for the case that someone gets locked in there by accident. It can only be opened from inside the vault, and only when the outside doors are closed. If all this is not enough for you, we can add that the area between the fences and the concrete walls is mined, and there are rings of barbed wire. The facility is protected so thoroughly that during World War II, the Great Charter of Liberties and British Royal Regalia, both of which are of great historical value, were kept there. No ordinary visitors are allowed into the grounds of the vault. There have been only 3 cases of inspections of the vault by non-employees of the Treasury Department. The first one was made in 1943 by U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt. The second in 1974 by members of the U.S. Congress and media representatives. It was a reaction to a conspiracy theory claiming that the U.S. elite had secretly removed all the gold. And for the third time, the vault opened its door in 2017, when Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell, along with a small group of officials, including Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, visited it for inspection. Would you like to peek into the most legendary place of American gold? Share your thoughts in the comments. And we are moving forward. What would you expect when you go for a walk with your dog? Definitely not something like discovering a unique cave. But that's what happened to 18-year-old Marcel Ravadat in September 1940. His dog, with the funny name Robot, was exploring a pit left by an uprooted tree. But it was not just an ordinary pit. It had an extension, a hole that led somewhere. Then Ravadat returned to the place with help. 3 friends. They found out that the hole was deep, to say the least. After crossing a 15-meter, 50 feet deep mine, they entered a strange cave. They thought it was a secret passage to the nearby Lascaux Manor, a passage that local legends told about. But the reality proved to be much more striking. The teens discovered that the walls of the cave were covered in animal images. That's how they became the discoverers of a world sensation. Since then, the whole world has known this place as the Lascaux Cave, near the village of Montignac in southwestern France. Its walls and ceiling are covered with more than 600 pictures. They are the result of the combined efforts of many generations of prehistoric people. Now, the age of the drawings is estimated at about 17,000 years, but there are still heated debates about that. The significance of the find was appreciated in 1979, when the cave was included in the UNESCO World Heritage List. The cave was opened for visitors as early as 1948. It was divided into a number of zones, with halls having figurative names: the Hall of the Bulls, the Passageway, the Shaft, the Nave, the Apse, and the Chamber of Felines. Unlike the older caves, where depictions of mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses have been found in the past, the paintings at Lascaux depict birds, buffaloes, deer, bison, and horses, all from the interstadial period, when there was warming. The paints, black and yellow, red and white, were made from charcoal, manganese, ochre, and iron oxides that were apparently mined in and around the site. But after just 7 years, by 1955, carbon dioxide, heat, and moisture from 1,200 visitors a day had visibly damaged the images. As the air conditions worsened, the walls became more and more affected by fungus and mold. Eventually, in 1963, the cave was closed to the public. The drawings were restored, and a system of daily surveillance was introduced. But the French government still wanted to share Lascaux's riches with the world, so they constructed a replica of the cave and called it Lascaux II. It was erected not far from the original cave. To reproduce the famous cave paintings, artist Monique Pétrol worked with the same natural pigments for 5 years. As a result, Lascaux II was opened to the public in 1983. However, it didn't end with that. There's also Lascaux III, a series of 5 exact reproductions from the halls of Nef and Val that have traveled around the world since 2012. And that's still not all. Lascaux IV is a new copy of all the painted areas of the cave. It is larger and more accurate, with integrated digital technology. Since December 2016, it has been on display in the new museum, on the hill overlooking Montignac. And now we move to the southernmost point of Iceland. It is an uninhabited volcanic island in the Vestmannaeyjar archipelago, formed by a volcanic eruption that began 130 meters, 430 feet below sea level, and reached the surface on November 14, 1963. The ash columns then rose into the sky to a great height, and on clear days they would have been seen even from the capital Reykjavik. The eruption continued until 1967, when the island reached its maximum size of 2.7 square kilometers, 1 square mile. Since then, it has steadily decreased in size due to erosion until it became 1.3 square kilometers, 0.5 square miles. According to the latest data, its maximum elevation is 155 meters, 509 feet above sea level, and it is expected that Surtsey will remain above the sea surface until at least 2100. By the way, the island was named after Surtur, a fire giant from Scandinavian mythology who set the earth on fire during the Last Judgment. Not only is Surtsey one of the newest islands in the world, but it is also one of the most filmed and actively studied, as well as one of the most restricted. Long before the eruption stopped, it was declared a nature reserve, and any trips there were only allowed to scientists. Now, very few people are allowed to visit Surtsey, and special permits are only granted for scientific research. It is forbidden to go ashore or dive near the island, to bring animals and generally any foreign living organisms, minerals, and soils into the island, or to leave garbage on it. Construction in the vicinity of the island is also strictly regulated. Scientists have used this unique opportunity to study the gradual development of life on a clean piece of land. The development of Surtsey has been monitored since the eruption began. What do these studies give us? An idea of how the new island develops naturally, and how its flora and fauna evolve without human intervention. In other words, it is actually a real natural laboratory. And what have the scientists seen over the years of observations? Various forms of life gradually colonized the originally barren land. Scientists observed the appearance of seeds carried by ocean currents, the emergence of mold, bacteria, and fungi. By the end of the first decade, there were 10 species of plants. By 2004, there were 75 moss species, 71 lichen species, and 24 fungi species. Moreover, Surtsey lies on the migratory path of many bird species, and this played an important role. Petrels and loons were the first to be spotted here, followed by gulls, swans, wild geese, and crows. A total of 89 bird species have been recorded on Surtsey, 57 of which nest elsewhere in Iceland. The 141-hectare, 384-acre island is also home to worms, spiders, beetles, mites, flies, and 335 species of invertebrates. Thanks to permanent protection, Surtsey will continue to provide invaluable biological colonization data in the long-term future. And we're moving on to another island where we'll find a special place. It was created by humans and is intended to play a key role in our planet's biosphere if something goes very wrong. This is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Yes, you heard it right. On an island above the Arctic Circle, between Norway and the North Pole, lies something vital to the future of mankind. It's not coal, oil, or precious minerals, but seeds. To get to this vault, you will have to descend 130 meters, 430 feet into the bowels of the ice mountain. That is the depth at which it is located. Of course, outsiders can't get in, but we will give you a tour. Imagine samples of all the agricultural plants that exist in the world gathered in one place. In a nutshell, this is the world's seed vault, a kind of Noah's Ark for crops. It contains millions of seeds from more than 930,000 species of food crops. It is essentially a huge safe box that holds the world's largest collection of agricultural biodiversity. Given the plant breeding, it is basically the material embodiment of 13,000 years of human agricultural history. Why was this particular corner of the world chosen for this purpose? It's hard to find a more remote place than the icy desert of Spitsbergen. It is the farthest north you can fly to on a commercial airline. Spitsbergen was chosen precisely because of its remoteness. It is as far away as possible from places where wars are going on or may break out, or where there is a threat of terrorism. Also, it has sub-zero temperatures. The Global Seed Vault, which opened in 2008, was dubbed the Doomsday Vault. So it seems that these seeds will be used in case of a global disaster on a planetary scale. But the vault was actually designed to protect against much smaller threats the seed banks around the world could face. These could be anything: wars, droughts, or other local natural disasters that could threaten some agrarian plant species with extinction. There are 3 halls in the vault, but only one is currently in use. The seeds are stored here in vacuum-packed silver bags and in glass tubes, all stacked in large boxes and carefully placed on floor-to-ceiling racks. The seeds lying in the deep freeze of the vault include wild and old varieties, many of which are no longer used in agriculture. And many of them don't even exist outside this seed collection. But they can be used to develop new strains that solve some problems of the world or a particular region. For example, if it becomes necessary to inoculate some plants with resistance to high temperatures or certain diseases. In total, there are about 1,700 vaults, called gene banks, in the world. The Spitsbergen Vault actually serves as an emergency and universal reserve for other vaults, and it has already partially fulfilled its main mission. For example, in 2015, seeds were taken from the Global Seed Vault at the request of the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, which was located in Aleppo, Syria. It had lost part of its collection due to hostilities. The seeds, awakened from their icy sleep, were planted in Lebanon and Morocco. The resulting generation of new seeds was partially selected and returned to the vault. Now, let's move to a warmer, though reportedly dangerous place. This story is like an Indiana Jones movie script. A stone army defends a closed ancient tomb that is said to be filled with priceless treasures and with deadly traps. Emperor Qin Shi Huang, founder of the Qin dynasty of China, who ruled from 247 to 210 BC, was the first emperor of a unified China. It was he who initiated the incorporation of diverse city walls into one Great Wall of China and laid out an extensive national road system. However, he is probably most famous for creating a real army of clay statues, known as the Terracotta Army. It consists of about 8,000 life-sized statues of soldiers, as well as numerous horses and chariots. Presumably, it was built around the mausoleum to protect the emperor in the afterlife. Qin Shi Huang was traditionally portrayed as a tyrant who drank wine infused with mercury for the sake of eternal life. At the time, they didn't know this toxic metal would work just the opposite. Probably, this accounts for his rather short life, only 49 years. In the center of Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum is a huge tomb where he was buried in 210 BC. This is one of the most mysterious places on our planet because the tomb has not yet been excavated. We know about what is inside from the words of the prominent ancient historian Sima Qian, who lived about 100 years after Qin Shi Huang, and these descriptions are impressive. According to him, the tomb is filled with rare artifacts and marvelous treasures. Also, craftsmen were ordered to make crossbows that would automatically shoot anyone who entered the tomb. There is mention of mercury, which is supposed to imitate the Yangtze and Yellow rivers and should flow by itself. At the top, according to Sima Qian, were images of celestial constellations, and at the bottom, the surface of the earth. Even the candles were designed not to go out for a very long time. However, there is evidence in other records that the tomb was supposedly looted and destroyed long ago. But perhaps the mentioned crossbows and rivers of mercury have helped to keep at least the inside of the mausoleum intact. Today, the tomb remains closed, as it is feared to damage the structure while opening it. But belief in the booby traps inside is so strong that Chinese archaeologists are nervous about what they might have to go through to get to the supposed treasure. You may consider the whole thing nothing more than a fairy tale. Yet, when scientists measured mercury levels in the area around the mausoleum, it was much higher than they had expected. And if there is a gem of truth in this story about rivers of mercury, what about crossbows ready to fire when someone walks by? If they were made of wood, they're probably already rotted and therefore not dangerous. But if they were made of certain metals, there's a chance they could still be deadly. And now we move on to another secret location, and a much more modern one. There, presumably, we'll have to deal with not the ancient dead, but something even worse. Dulce is a small town in the southwestern United States in the state of New Mexico. It looks like an unremarkable little town. It doesn't even have traffic lights. But according to the most bizarre rumors, it's just a cap, a superstructure hiding a giant underground facility where unimaginable experiments are conducted. Get ready. Some, or even a lot of things in this story might seem like incredible conspiracy theories to you, but we'll still take a glimpse into this place, at least to set the record straight. So, some believe there is a secret base, a 7-story facility under this town. It allegedly contains creatures that seem to have leaped from the pages of sci-fi books. Just check this list out. Human-animal hybrids, human-alien hybrids, and of course, the most incredible alien technology. Moreover, it is said that there have even been armed clashes between aliens and humans. Yes, it sounds like complete nonsense, But let's find out where all this came from. After all, not every American town has such an impressive legend. The first statements about the existence of the base date back to the 1930s. But rumors about the invasion of aliens in this area began massive spreading in the 1970s. They were associated with the name of the former New Mexico State police officer, Gabe Valdez. He discovered inexplicable cattle injuries in the area. And Philip Schneider, a former explosives expert who worked for the U.S. government, believed that Dulce was the site of a violent war between humans and aliens. Schneider, who had a high access level by the way, claimed to have helped build a secret underground base there in 1979. In it, he said he witnessed a battle with underground aliens that left 60 people dead. And this war allegedly has not ceased until today. In the same year, 1979, another key figure in the Dulce Base conspiracy theory, a businessman from Albuquerque, Paul Benowitz, appeared on stage. He claimed to intercept messages from spaceships and alien objects outside Albuquerque. By the 1980s, he believed he had discovered a secret underground base near Dulce filled with gray aliens and humans. By the way, Benowitz has a PhD in physics. And Tim Anderson, a former Dulce police officer, claimed to have seen a UFO in the town in the late 1990s. Allegedly, it illuminated the entire valley and simply disappeared into the rocks. Similar claims of paranormal phenomena have been made at different times by different people in Dulce. And if you look at all this seriously, the explanations are rather prosaic. For example, religious and political scientist Michael Barkham explains that the presence of secret missile bases during the Cold War may have been the trigger for conspiracy theories that eventually grew into such incredible legends about a huge underground alien base under the town. But we will take a break from conspiracy theories and head to another island. Niihau Island. It is also known as the Forbidden Island. Why? Keep watching and you'll find out. Niihau, the smallest inhabited island in Hawaii, has an area of 180 square kilometers, 70 square miles. It may seem like the perfect place for a vacation in the tropics with beautiful palm trees, rare animals, and probably few tourists. But in fact, it's quite the opposite. There really aren't any tourists, but this Pacific island is completely closed to outsiders. In 1864, Elizabeth Sinclair bought Niihau from the Kingdom of Hawaii for $10,000 US, which now equals about $190,000 US. Then the island passed to her descendants, the Robinson family, and since 1915, strangers have been banned from entering the island. Niihau is now closed to all but the Robinson family and their relatives, U.S. Navy personnel, government officials, and invited guests. It is managed by brothers Bruce and Keith Robinson. Life on the island is unusual. A little more than 80 of its permanent residents, native Hawaiians, live without paved roads, telephone communication, water supply, and stores. They use horses and bicycles as transport. Solar panels instead of electricity mains, and barges deliver food from the nearby island of Kauai. Children from Niihau take a weekly canoe trip to Kauai to attend school. The locals here speak a Niihau dialect of Hawaiian. Some have radios and TVs, although due to poor signal, they often watch pre-recorded media files. Niihau regularly suffers from droughts, which sometimes force residents to temporarily evacuate to Kauai until rains replenish water supplies. Residents also typically commute to Kauai for work and medical care or school, so many of them call both islands home. To avoid a long boat ride, the island owners use an Augusta A109 helicopter for emergencies and just to transport residents to and from Kauai. Despite its tiny size, the island has played a small but notable role in history. It was the site of the 1941 Niihau incident. After attacking Pearl Harbor, a Japanese fighter was shot and crash-landed on the island. The Japanese wanted to use the island specifically for emergency landings, as they considered it uninhabited. In fact, it turned out to be different, because at the time, the island belonged to the Robinsons and was inhabited by Hawaiians and even a few Japanese. The fighter pilot survived the landing and was amazed to find this surprise. The local Hawaiians didn't speak Japanese and didn't even know about the attack on Pearl Harbor. And they even helped the Japanese pilot at first. And then followed a dramatic story worthy of being screened in Hollywood. Lies, threats, hostage-taking, escape attempts, shootings, injuries, murders, and even suicides. In the end, the Japanese pilot was killed, and one of the islanders even received a medal for merit from the U.S. government. And in 1944, U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt even considered Niihau as a possible site for the UN headquarters. These days, the island remains closed. The Coast Guard patrols it to make sure no one tries to land. People are not allowed to come here without an invitation from someone on the island. The only other ways to get close to Niihau are helicopter tours over it or boat tours off the coast. Unique heritage, manifestations of human genius, priceless artifacts. All this can be observed in such forbidden places of our planet. They help us better understand the history of our world and our place in it. We might not find aliens there, but frankly, we didn't really want to. Imagine you find yourself in a place with no one around for miles. You're surrounded by lush vegetation, and you're also being stared at from all sides. These eyes are drawn, but that only seems to make it creepier. But it's even more terrifying when you see those to whom they belong. These are dolls. Not just ordinary dolls, but painted, warped, broken. And there are hundreds of them. Makes you shiver, doesn't it? And you want to get out of here. Well, that's only if you can find a boatman to take you away. Getting out of here is as difficult as getting in. Here's a hint. You're in a corner of the globe you'd rather stay away from. Today, you're going to find out what makes GPS go crazy in an area of Maryland. Where are the doors to hell? Which town has an endless underground fire? Have you fastened your seatbelts? Then let's go. We'll visit 10 amazing places people prefer to stay away from. And we'll start with an amazing spiritual center, which is actually a very famous tourist spot. But it has one place that people avoid. How come? Let's take a look in there. In the heart of the sacred forest, in the Mie Prefecture of Japan, lies the ancestral shrine of the Japanese emperors, the Grand Shrine of Ise, or Ise Jingu. It is the most important Shinto center in the country. It consists of many shrines centered around two main shrines, the Naiku Shrine, dedicated to the sun goddess Amaterasu, and the Gekku Shrine, dedicated to Toyouke, the goddess of food, clothing, and shelter. The Naiku Shrine is demolished and rebuilt every 20 years in accordance with the Shinto idea of death and rebirth. And the main shrine preserves the most important object in Japan's imperial history, the sacred mirror. It is one of the most important imperial regalia, representing the spirit of Amaterasu. It would seem that such a place might be a tourist center. Basically, it is. Attending the shrine site is a real pilgrimage for Shintoists, and the emperor also makes an annual visit here. Yet, people stay away from the main shrine. The reason is simple: because they can't enter it. The temple is inaccessible to ordinary visitors. Only senior priests and the emperor are allowed inside. The general public is not allowed into the central buildings, hidden behind 4 high wooden fences. But tourists are free to stroll through the forest, including its alleys, which date back to the Meiji period, i.e. from 1868 to 1912. Still, one can admire this place easily. Yes, this is the least scary place in our top 10, but we are only at the beginning. The next spot also used to be closed to the ordinary public for religious reasons, but although now there are no bans, there are few people who want to get there. Let's move to the Komi Republic in Russia. Here, west of the Ural Mountains in the Toretsko-Pechorsky district, rise the rock formations of Manpupuner. This translates as small idol mountain. These are 7 stone pillars in a bizarre shape. In geology, such formations are called buttes. And although Manpupuner is quite a popular attraction, it is not tainted by tourism at all. In fact, it has guests quite rarely. The height of these rocks varies from 30 to 42 meters. About 200 million years ago, there were high mountains in place of the stone pillars. Rain, snow, wind, frost, and heat gradually destroyed them. The surviving remnants are made of hard rock, which is why they have survived to this day. Although there is a slightly different geological version. According to it, there used to be a mountain with cavities or caves. At some point, magma was squeezed out of the bowels of the earth from below into these voids and filled them like soft ice cream fills a waffle cone. Over time, the previously mentioned climatic factors destroyed the mountain, and it crumbled, becoming a simple pile of rocks. The solid lava, on the other hand, remained. Continuing the analogy, the waffle cone crumbled, but the ice cream remained almost unchanged, replicating the shape of the cave's curves. One pillar, 34 meters high, stands somewhat apart from the rest. It resembles an upside-down bottle. 6 more are nestled on the edge of the cliff. The pillars resemble the figures of a huge man or the head of a horse or ram. These formations were once considered sacred by the local Mansi people. Maybe that's why there are many legends about Manpupuner. According to one of them, giants once kidnapped Aim, the chief's beautiful daughter. The girl's brother set out to get her back. The good spirits provided him with a magic shield. At the crucial moment, the young man took out the shield, and the sun reflected from it and turned the giants into stone. This is how the 7 rock formations appeared. According to another legend depicting conflicts between the Mansi and the Nenets people, the giants declared war on the Mansi. They climbed the mountain and saw a local angered deity nearby. This sight turned the giants into stone pillars, and so they stand to these days. And their shaman dropped his tambourine. The instrument rolled and turned into Mount Koip. In the past, this place was forbidden. Only Mansi shamans were allowed to climb the plateau. It was prohibited for ordinary people to come near the weathering pillars. It was regarded as a terrible sin. Nowadays, this place is rarely visited, mainly because it is rather difficult to get here. The plateau is protected by UNESCO, and the pillars themselves look quite dangerous, as if they were about to collapse. That's why even daredevils prefer to stay away from them. Our next place is no less beautiful, but it is barely visited. A little-known piece of land, Heard Island, is often hidden in thick clouds. It is located about 2/3 of the way from Madagascar to Antarctica and is part of the Heard Island and McDonald Islands in the southern Indian Ocean. This deserted island was spotted by the American sailor John Heard from the ship Oriental in 1853 on his way from Boston to Melbourne. A month later, he reported his discovery, and the island was named after him. But people first landed on Heard Island only 2 years later. So why do people tend to stay away from it? The explanation lies rather in the natural conditions. To reach the island, you have to travel 4,000 kilometers from Western Australia across stormy and rough seas. From there, the journey takes 2 weeks by vessel. There are no ports or harbors on Heard Island, so ships have to anchor in the sea. The coastline is 102 kilometers long. Only fishermen and research scientists usually travel there. And if something goes wrong, they are unlikely to be rescued, as the location is remote. But those few who manage to reach this distant wonder can enjoy truly pristine and untouched nature. Also, there is an active volcano with a pompous name, Big Ben, covered with glaciers. Actually, the whole island was formed as a result of the volcano's activity. Its height is 2,745 meters, so it is the highest mountain on the territory belonging to Australia. Big Ben was formed about 1 million years ago, and now looks like a classic volcano, conical in shape and consisting of layers of solidified lava, pumice, and ash. Smoke billows from its summit. In 1997, Heard and McDonald Islands were inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. There were 5 private expeditions to Heard Island between 1965 and 2000. Mawson Peak at the top of Big Ben was climbed successfully in 1965, 1983, and 2000. It has erupted several times in the last decade. The island is mostly inhabited by insects and has a large population of seabirds, penguins, and seals. It was seals that attracted fishing ships here in the 19th and early 20th centuries. As a result, the seal population has declined dramatically. Today, the island is protected. Since 1987, access to the territory without a permit from the Australian Department of Environment, Sport, Tourism and Territories is prohibited. And this is just for the better. As a result, the seal population has increased again, and in general, the area managed to preserve its pristine beauty. Now, let's move from the deserted island to another place, which is very popular among tourists. And now, it's prohibited by law to approach it. Yes, you got it right. This beautiful place is Pravchichka Gate, which is the largest rock gate of the Elbe Sandstone Mountains. The span is about 26.5 meters, and the height is about 16 meters. Yes, it was nature that created such beauty. Thanks to its unique charm, the arch became a movie star. You can see it in the Chronicles of Narnia. And yet, by law, you should stay away from this place. Why? It's because of concerns about the preservation of this rock formation. The natural arch is quite fragile and has been subjected to erosion by natural forces over millions of years. And intensive pedestrian traffic and human activity only further contributed to the acceleration of this destructive process. That is why Rockgate has been closed for a very long time, since 1982 to be exact. Visitors are usually allowed to view the arch from certain viewing platforms or from paths that provide a safe distance. Next is the place you can't get in unless you're a staff member, and if you get close, your GPS starts to misbehave. What does that mean, you might ask? Just that this place is so secret that the GPS on the car's dashboard gives wrong indications when approaching it. Are we in some kind of anomaly zone? The answer is that the military is jamming the signals there. The place is a U.S. Army facility in Maryland called Fort Meade. Can regular visitors get in? Obviously no. It includes several important structures, including a national security agency headquarters the size of the Pentagon. As in the case with many military sites, ordinary people prefer to stay away from this place. That said, it's worth noting that Fort Meade employs more than 54,000 employees, military and civilian, and is the largest employer in the state of Maryland and the second largest employer in the armed forces. But those are by no means the most interesting facts about Fort Meade. It is famous for being the scene of the paranormal. And this is not a joke, but officially declassified information. For nearly 20 years, since the 1970s, a secret Army unit working together with the Defense Intelligence Agency conducted research and experiments that tested the use of so-called psychoenergetics for military purposes. With the $20 million Stargate project, the US government was trying to train an army of telepathists. The mind readers, or rather those who considered themselves as such, tried to get information about various inaccessible plans within the framework of the project. In some cases, they even tried to glimpse into the future. In total, 22 people participated in the operations and were tested for psychic abilities, and sometimes they were actually engaged in real intelligence operations. Presumably, their methods were used to find Brigadier General Joseph Dozier, who was kidnapped in Italy in 1981. They also tried to find the whereabouts of Saddam Hussein during the Gulf War, gather information on Russian submarine capabilities, and even find plutonium in North Korea. In 1995, the CIA deemed Stargate a failure. The project was shut down and declassified the same year. So the US doesn't have an army of magicians these days, at least according to the information available to us now. But people have a good reason to stay away from this place, even without regard to bans. There are at least 14 hazardous waste sites in the vast Fort Meade area, such as an ammunition disposal area, a landfill from the 1940s, a closed sanitary landfill, etc. After a 2007 inspection by the Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Army promised to take steps to limit environmental damage. Whether they were actually taken is unknown. Now, let's move to another place in the U.S. that used to be prosperous, but now there's hardly a single person there. What happened? Centralia is a real ghost town in Columbia County, Pennsylvania. Its population has dropped from 1,000 in 1980 to 5 in 2020. So why do people now avoid this place? To answer this, let's travel back to 1962. It's unclear what the starting point was, but a fire broke out at Centralia's coal mine. The main version is that the city government hired 5 firefighters to clean up the city dump. They set the dump on fire and let it burn for a while. But unlike previous years, the fire was not completely extinguished. The fire eventually spread into a maze of abandoned coal mines near Centralia. Other sources say the fire started even earlier when a garbage truck dumped hot ash or coal into an open garbage pit. According to yet another hypothesis, the 1932 mine fire was never fully extinguished, and by 1962, the fire had reached the landfill site. But this version is disputed. Only 17 years later, by 1979, the locals realized the scale of the problem. It happened when a gas station owner inserted a probe into one of his underground tanks to check the fuel level. When he pulled it out, the probe seemed hot to him. It turned out that the temperature of the gasoline in the tank was as much as 78 degrees Celsius. The gas station had to shut down. But the problem gained the greatest amount of attention in 1981, when a 12-year-old town resident fell into a hole that suddenly opened up under his feet in his backyard. The boy eventually escaped, but the plume of steam escaping from the hole was tested. It was found to contain deadly levels of carbon monoxide. Centralia residents were split on whether the underground fire posed a direct threat to the city. Nevertheless, in 1983, the U.S. Congress allocated more than $42 million for relocation. Virtually all residents accepted the government's offer. More than 1,000 people left the city, and 500 buildings were demolished. In the 1990s, the forced alienation of all private property of the city in favor of the state of Pennsylvania took place. Residents were unable to appeal this decision, despite attempts to do so. And in 2002, the U.S. Postal Service stopped using the Centralia zip code. Today, few homes remain in Centralia. The area looks like a field with many paved streets running through it. By the way, the screenwriter of the movie Silent Hill examined Centralia while working on the script. The signs, metal steam vents in the south of the neighborhood, and smoke coming from cracks in the ground warn of the ongoing fire. According to forecasts, the underground fire could burn for another 250 years. And now we are going to take a closer look at another hotspot. Watch out, we're very close, and that means you'll get a blast of heat and hear the sound of 1,000 dancing flames. It's a gas crater near the village of Darvaza in Turkmenistan, in the middle of the Karakum Desert, about 260 kilometers north of the capital, Ashgabat. Officially, it is called the Shining of Karakum. Unofficially, the Door to Hell, or the Gates of Hell. So scary this place is. The nickname of this place alone is enough to keep one away from it. But there are even more substantial reasons. In fact, it is a burning natural gas field that has collapsed into a cavern, i.e., a void. The bottom and edges of the crater are ablaze with hundreds of natural gas flames. In some of these natural torches, the flames reach 10 to 15 meters high. The crater has been burning since the 1980s. It is 60 to 70 meters in diameter and about 30 meters deep. The early years of the crater are shrouded in mystery. Some claim that the crater collapsed in the 1960s and was set on fire in the 1980s to prevent the release of toxic gases, and so it has been burning ever since. Others insist that the site was drilled by Soviet engineers in 1971 as an oil field, but collapsed a few days later, forming a crater. The engineers decided to set the crater on fire to neutralize the release of toxic gases, but underestimated the volume of gas. In post-Soviet Turkmenistan, the crater became a major tourist attraction. In 2004, the village of Darvaza was disbanded by a presidential decision. 6 years later, the head of state visited the crater and ordered the local authorities to figure out ways to get rid of it, or at least make sure it wouldn't hinder the development of nearby gas fields. The village was later re-established by the renaming of Aeroport Village to Derwizi in 2016. In 2013, a state nature reserve was created in the Karakum Desert, including the Darvaza crater. That same year, traveler George Korounis became the first person to step on the bottom of the crater. He was collecting soil samples for the Extreme Microbiome Project. The descent was sponsored by National Geographic and was featured in an episode of the National Geographic Channel series Do or Die. Korounis discovered bacteria that live at the bottom of the crater at high temperatures. They feel excellent in this fiery hell, and curiously are not found in the soil in the area surrounding the crater. In January 2022, the president of Turkmenistan announced plans to extinguish the crater because of its harmful impact on the health of local residents, the environment, and the gas industry. But despite the president's intentions, the crater remains open and burning to this day. It is now surrounded by a low metal fence. This is done for the safety of tourists who still do visit the place regularly, despite the clear danger. Ordinary people prefer to stay away, and rightly so. And from here, we move on to another attraction, this time in Europe. It causes real terror in many people. This place is definitely not for sensitive people, but the tour will be much safer with us. So, welcome to a place in Palermo that will definitely impress you, the Capuchin Catacombs. Here, you will see real mummies. The beginning of this gloomy and nowadays tourist place was laid in 1599. The Capuchins, a religious order of Franciscan friars in the Catholic Church, mummified and moved a recently deceased friar, Brother Silvestro of Gubbio, to the catacombs. Gradually, other deceased monks began to join him. According to another version, the friars soon noticed that the bodies of the brothers laid to rest in the catacombs were little prone to decomposition. That is, they self-mummified, so the catacombs were turned into a kind of cemetery. Some bodies were embalmed. Others were placed in hermetically sealed glass cases. Monks were preserved in their everyday clothes, and sometimes with ropes they wore as penance. Originally, only deceased monks were left in the catacombs, but in the centuries that followed, burial in the Capuchin catacombs became a status symbol. In their wills, the local elite would ask to be dressed in certain clothes, or even have them changed regularly once they were buried there. Priests were buried in their church vestments, while others were dressed according to that day's fashions. Bodies stand, lie, sit, and hang in different poses with different head turns, so when attending this place, it feels like being in a real city of the dead. The halls were divided into categories: men, women, girls, children, priests, monks, and professionals. Relatives came to pray for the deceased and maintained the remains. What funds were used to maintain the catacombs, you may ask? They existed on donations of relatives of the deceased. And therein lies the rub, at least for those who could no longer or would no longer pay. Each new body was placed in a temporary niche and then moved to a permanent location. As long as the payments continued, the body remained in its place. But if the relatives stopped sending money, it was shelved until the payments were resumed. The last monk was buried in the catacombs in 1871. It was Brother Ricardo. But even after that, famous people were buried there. Speaking of famous people, the catacombs hold the remains of Italian painter Giuseppe Velázquez and sculptor Filippo Panino. This place was officially closed for burials in 1880. Nevertheless, the last burials date back to the 1920s to 1930s. The very last was Giovanni Licata de Bolsena, the Count of Isnello, in 1939. In total, the catacombs contain 8,000 bodies, and 1,252 of them are mummified. It's certainly an impressive sight, definitely for thrill seekers only. But let's now move to another corner of Italy, though almost as creepy as the Capuchin burial catacombs. This is the island of Poveglia. It is located off the coast of Venice and Lido, and is nicknamed Ghost Island because of its dark secrets. It is tiny and difficult to find on maps. In the 9th century, it was mostly inhabited by refugees from Padua and Este. When Venice and along the way Poveglia were attacked by Genoa in 1379, the residents fled to another island called Giudecca. Poveglia was then abandoned until 1527, when Italy was struck by the plague epidemic. According to local tales, at the time of the plague, people who resisted were dragged to the island by force if they had even the slightest symptoms of the disease. The first ships carrying plague victims arrived on the island in the 16th century. The dead were thrown into deep pits, and when they were full, they were set on fire or covered with earth. The 70,000 square meter area was used as a mass grave site, where around 160,000 victims of the disease are believed to have been cremated to stop its spread. It is said that human ashes cover the island to this day. Is that not enough for you to stay away from this place? Then let's reveal another dark side of this island. In 1922, a psychiatric clinic was opened here, which functioned until 1968. Supposedly, gruesome experiments and surgeries were performed there, including lobotomy. And legend has it that the doctor who went mad, or, according to another version, The director of the facility eventually committed suicide by throwing himself from the bell tower. After the psychiatric hospital was closed, the island was never really cleared out, so all the stuff was just left lying around. Nowadays, locals still avoid Poveglia Island. When the weather is clear, one can supposedly see skulls and bones beneath the surface of the water. And local fishermen enjoy fueling local legends by saying they hear screams and moans from the island and the sound of the bell on the tower. By the way, the bell itself was removed many years ago. The island, according to local legends, has permanent ghosts. Little Mary is a spirit that has been seen for over 400 years. This child most likely died of the plague. She wanders the beach and weeps blood-curdlingly. And Pietro, the ghost of a man in a wheelchair, reportedly still rides the corridors of the abandoned hospital. And then there's the spirit of a young woman with a terrified expression who is afraid of the mad doctor. In other words, visitors to the island feel they are being watched. But no one has lived here since the hospital closed. That is, since 1968. So who is it that still comes here despite everything? Adventurers and thrill seekers. But it's not so easy. First, you have to apply and get approval, which can take years. Visiting the place without it is illegal. A further difficulty is finding someone willing to take you there, as fishermen avoid the place by all means. Would you dare to set foot on this land? Share your thoughts in the comments. And now, from an island with a dark past, let's move on to another island where seemingly nothing terrible happened. Yet, it's creepy as well. Just on the south of the center of Mexico City lies the Island of Dolls. There are hundreds of dolls hanging all over this island. What's the big deal? Why would it be scary? Well, these dolls are broken and disfigured. The whole setting resembles a horror movie. You wouldn't want to be alone in such a place. But Don Julian Santana Barrera has been the only resident of this island for many years, since the early 1950s. The island itself became famous in 1943, when Mexican director Emilio Fernandez used it as the location for the movie Maria Candelaria. But back to Barrera. He grew vegetables and fished. He had to move to the island after being kicked out of his hometown of Barrio de la Asunción. But he didn't have it easy in his new place either. According to rumors, one day Barrera came across the body of a girl floating in a canal. According to another version, he heard the desperate cries, but could not save her, and the poor girl drowned. The next day, Barrera allegedly found a doll floating in the canal. He assumed it belonged to the girl, so he hung it on a tree in memory of her and as a talisman to ward off evil spirits. The next day, Barrera found a second doll in the canal, but the story didn't end there. Legend has it that the girl's spirit began to haunt the island. So, to somehow appease it, the man spent the next 50 years getting dolls in every possible way. In his own words, he mainly took them from the waters of the canal. But, according to Barrera, the spirit did not want to calm down. So, he began to break and disfigure the dolls on purpose, believing that this way he could restrain the ghost. His spooky collection, hung all over the island, consisted of hundreds of them. After Barrera's death, his family opened the island to tourists. In addition to hundreds of dolls, there are 3 huts and a small museum with articles from local newspapers about the island and Barrera. The one-room hut where he slept displays his first doll, as well as Augustina, his favorite doll. You can get to the island by a trajinera boat, but some boatmen refuse to take tourists there because of superstitions, and various rumors support them. Thus, there are reports that the dolls move their heads and arms and open their eyes. Visitors also claim that the dolls whisper to each other. Some visitors lay gifts around the dolls, asking for miracles and blessings. Some even change their clothes. The most curious thing is that virtually a real cult has been created around the drowned girl. But there is no proof she actually existed. This fact has not kept the cameras away. The island has been featured in many TV shows, as well as other places on our list.